Alright, for today's critical thought, we're going to be discussing the design and the allure of collectibles in video games, from starts, hearts, and many, many more. I hope that holds true in real life as I'm working on my own very special collectible for Game Wisdom in the coming weeks. Collectible design is one of the most primal or lizard brainy Pavlovian effects that can happen when it comes to playing video games. We know there may be dozens if not hundreds of these things scattered around, but come hell or high water, we will try and collect them all. But despite that attraction, there is a very big difference between good and bad collectible design, and that has to do with how they are implemented in the title. But when it comes to collectibles, we're not discussing power-ups, fire flowers, those boomerang / holy cross from Castlevania. You get the picture. Now, we want to be generous. We could say that collectibles have existed even going back as far as the early arcade games, with, Pac-Man power pellets. Try saying that 10 times fast. But the idea or the attraction of collectibles really came to their own with the arrival of 3D and 3D based games, especially the open world or open-ended style of games, where you have this massive space, you gotta fill with something, and it's a great way of keeping players invested, and it does several things to aid them. So, the first thing, like I just said, is that a good collectible occupies the space. Because, as we all know, when it comes to designing an open world or a massive environment, you can't exactly make every area be 100% on or be a focus. Good level design pretty much contradicts that. You won't have these very specialized sections set up to test or push the player through. Collectibles allow you to give more elements for the player to search for, and it can also be used as both a guide towards where next they're going, or as a little bit of a nifty reward for something off the beaten path. Mario games have done this, or the 3D Mario titles have done this, I think as far as back as Super Mario 64, with having the red coins put in various places in each of the courses. Another thing a good collectible does is that it provides or it compartmentalizes a form of progression. This goes back into that Pavlovian response, that you give the player a checklist that they have to find 75 doodads somewhere. Well, they're going to keep doing it. And as you keep finding little ones here and there, it's going to motivate them to find them all. Because who wants to leave 60 of 75 completed, right? And this has been a major part of quests in many MMOs. And talking about the idea of breaking down these quests and making them popular, that's definitely a little bit too big for today's video. Now, another good point about collectibles, and one that we'll come back to when we get to our game footage later, is that they can be used as another form of progression or powering up the player. And that takes us into what is that line between a good collectible and a bad one. And since we'll talk about good ones later, let's get to some of the bad ones first. Like I said, the open 3D genre has really taken to collectibles as something to kind of pass the time or give the player another thing to do when they're not going after quests and major battles. But just putting in 500 random things around the world isn't going to motivate someone to collect them unless they are absolutely obsessed with that 100%. And most people aren't going to be exploring the world in terms of the side or extra content without some kind of extrinsic motivation. Now, there are people who have played MMOs and overworld games purely for the exploration. People who like to role play or just looking at the sights. But if you want to convince someone to start finding 9,000 feathers or kill 200 pigeons or anything like that, then you have to do certain things to make sure that they're going to be motivated to keep doing it. So the first one is that there has to be a way of finding them. What that means is you can't just put 400 things around the world and just say, okay, start hunting them. There has to be some way for the player to track them. Now, the basic idea is that the item itself will give off a clue or some kind of indication that the player is close by. Could be a small graphical effect, it could be a sound, it could even be some kind of like enemy cube. You don't know. But there has to be something. If you're just going to put these things in and just scatter them almost willy-nilly, the player is not going to want to hunt around and just stumble upon them out of just 100% pure luck. This was one of the things I kind of had issues with Breath of the Wild. They had, I think they were a Kokoro? I forget the name of those like little seeds you could find, and they were built around I'm going to say a few more times there, manner of bonus challenges hidden throughout the land of Hyrule. But the problem was that there was no real rhyme or reason to where these challenges were. So at one point you may just find 3 stones in a triangle formation somewhere. That would be where a seed was. Another time it could be maybe a tree that instead of standing straight up, maybe it's like at an angle that you have to climb. And it got to the point where I was just like, I don't really want to just go on a complete, 1% scavenger hunt there. Now, another point about a good collectible is that each time the player picks one up, there should always be a benefit. There should always be something by getting it just at the beginning that's going to reward the player going forward. And this can be as small as riding with bonus coins or money, to even adding in gameplay or game-changing effects. This was a major problem that I've always had with the Grand Theft Auto series when it came to their collectibles. I think it was like packages, briefcase. I think Grand Theft Auto 4 you had to kill pigeons, and that's where that reference came from. The problem, though, was twofold. One, there was no explanation in-game or any hints or clues as to where they were. GTA 4 actually had a fake website that you could go on that would show you where the pigeons were, but you had to keep revisiting it. The second problem was that when you picked them up, they only gave a major reward. I think it was like every 5 or 10 of those pickups. Some of them did reward you with money, but as we all know, money in Grand Theft Auto becomes irrelevant at some point. And you always want the player to feel like they're getting something. Even just collecting one. It's the whole idea of, eating a potato chip. You can't just eat one of them. And part of the reason for today's critical thought was when I replayed Super Mario Odyssey. And one of the big things that Mario Odyssey did was kind of shifted the formula or the motivation for the power moons versus the stars or wherever the heck they were in previous Galaxy games. They could have been stars as well in that too. But traditionally in a Mario game, or I should say more specifically in a 3D Mario game, the various collectibles and MacGuffins were always tied to the massive challenge of each world. So you either had to complete a section, fight a boss. There was a sense of a major progression or milestone attached to them. In Mario Odyssey, Nintendo went for this just throw all these power moons at the player. So that each kingdom in Mario Odyssey had like 60 or 70 ones for you to collect. And while it may not sound like much in terms of going from power stars to power moons, this really changed the overall philosophy or mission statement that Super Mario Odyssey had compared to previous 3D Mario titles. So much so that the first time I played the game, I didn't really like it as much as previous Mario entries. But when I recently went through it again, as I was doing research for my second book, it started to come to life for me. And the change had to do with how to approach the levels or the design of them. As we said in previous Mario games, the stars themselves were your major bullet points in each level. When you found one, there was going to be a grand challenge, a boss fight, or something special you had to do for it. And while there are many power moons that are like that, the vast majority of them are simply just in the environment. It could be you start a level, there's a power moon up there on that building. There's a power moon in that water. You see that bridge? There's maybe a power moon on the underside of it. Just go and get them. And while this may sound like kind of cheapening the value of these collectibles. What it did was it actually provided two distinct advantages. First, it allowed that sense of progression and achievement to occur far more rapidly compared to previous Mario entry games and other 3D platformers. Again, the rate that you're picking up a Power Moon, especially at the beginning of the game, is vastly quicker compared to other Mario titles. This allows someone to start getting that sense of accomplishment. Wow, my mouth just completely dried out there. Sorry about that. Accomplishment very quickly. Another point is that it allows for the difficulty curve to be a little bit easier for new players. Because as we all know, the major point of a collectible in a Mario title is that it is the gate mechanic to unlock more things. Mario Odyssey especially, every kingdom has a Power Moon requirement, especially to beat the game. I think it's like 700 or 800 Power Moons, I forget. But by having all these moons laid out, it allows any player of any skill level to eventually work their way towards progression. And this is a major point about collectibles in general, or this kind of MacGuffin hunt in 3D platformers. That if you only have, let's say, 300 collectibles in your game, you're not going to require the player to get all 300 to beat the game. Because you want everyone to at least experience some kind of conclusion or ending. So in Mario 64, you only have to collect, I think it's 70 or 75 of the 120. In Mario Odyssey, I think it's 200 to 300, I forget the exact total, you need to actually beat Bowser and get that ending. But by having a far greater number, it allows you to kind of, again, go back to that compartmentalize the progression. Basically, as I'm exploring, I'm just always on the lookout for Power Moons. If I'm doing something and I see a Power Moon, I'm going to stop that, go get it, come back. And again, each one I'm getting is working towards a big total or some kind of reward. In the small scale, it could be unlocking a new kingdom. The next tier would be unlocking new costumes and things at the shop. And then the ultimate reward is, of course, accessing Darker Side. But again, it's not just about collecting 400 Power Moons. It's about collecting the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. We just keep repeating until at some point you have 400 Power Moons and you're not sure how it happened. But going back to the MMO example, this is why it's better to have these short-term rewards as opposed to nothing but long-term. It's better, for instance, that let's say if I collect 50 collectibles, I will get a 50% movement speed buff. Well, make each collectible give you 1% instead of saving it for the end. Because that way the player is going to see that each little one is building up towards something greater. Speaking of that, we're going to get to our example of a game that probably has one of the most effective collectible hunts in any game, and why it's so strange that nobody has managed to copy it. Not even the game we're going to be actually showing game footage of, which the example, unfortunately, I don't have any to collect. But as always, a quick shout out to our Patreon backers. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon backers. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, you'll find our Discord channel linked down below. Here is footage of A Hat in Time, a very, I would say, underrated 3D platformer that came out in 2017. Unfortunately, the game that I want to discuss came out far earlier than that, and I don't have any footage of it. So I'm just going to let this go, and you guys can enjoy the visuals of our little heroine here running around. But one of the best examples of collectible design that I've seen in just about any game came from the original Crackdown. Now, obviously with Crackdown 3 out, I haven't had a chance to play that one, and since it's currently Xbox One exclusive, I don't know if I will. But the original Crackdown had one of the most effective collectible hunts in the form of the agility orbs. Now, you didn't play that game. How it worked was, in each of the game's 3 major cities, there were these things called agility orbs scattered around. The orbs themselves were basically categorized by tier, and the tier denoted the difficulty, and that difficulty was based on their position or their distance from the ground. The higher up they were, the more challenging it was to get them, so it was a higher tier. Every time you picked up an agility orb, it would do two things. The first is that it would very subtly but passively increase your max jump height. The second thing it did will reward you with agility experience. As you leveled up your agility, your character would run faster, jump higher, and you'll get those massive Superman leaps when it gets high enough. And that's it. That's all they did. But it still remains as one of the best examples, thanks to, again, that Pavlovian response we have to a collectible hunt. So, the agility orbs themselves would always emit this very distinct hum when you're near one. And this is your way of cluing in the player to the fact that they are nearby. And this was essential in trying to find them. Because again, as you're dashing and driving and jumping and shooting your way through the cities, it's kind of hard to take notice of a small green blip on the screen. And this is the first thing I don't see too many open world designers do, is give not only a visual, but an auditory distinction or alert when the player is nearby. The second is that they were set up essentially within the various places of the environment to test the player. Some of them would be like lower on the ground, other ones could be like out on an electrical wire or on top of a small apartment complex. But the point was that they were always set up so that the player would have to engage to find them. Going back to the Power Moon example, the player had to, if the player was doing something, there was always that alert to stop what they're doing and go pick up a quick agility orb. But then there may be another one nearby. And there were a lot of them in the game, and I forget the grand total off the top of my head. The next point is the obvious one. Each one you're picking up has both a short-term and a long-term reward for the player. The short-term being, of course, I jump higher. The long-term is I can eventually level up and do even more with my agility. And by doing it like this, it also made the open world exploration a lot more engaging, because you would see that scale or that growth from beginning to end. When you start playing Crackdown, you can barely jump like 5-6 feet off the ground. By the end of the game, you are jumping like, I think it was like 80 to 100 feet off the ground, wall jumping and all that other crazy stuff. I think there was wall jumping in that one. But you get the picture. And again, it gives a weight and a motivation to the collectible hunting. Now, with that said, though, there are games that can go too far. There have been a few examples, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, and for those of you watching this right now, leave a comment if you can remember this. But I remember there are certain open world games that would tie actual skill perks or progression like that to collectible hunting. I think Far Cry, starting from 3, may have been an example of that. And how you had to hunt down the enemies, or the animals, in order to get quality of life upgrades, like more wallet or more bullet capacity, stuff like that. And you gotta be careful when it comes to collectibles like this. Now, in games like Mario, again, when it is the primary progression, like the Power Moons, that's alright. But if the collectible hunt is something that is secondary, you have to be careful with how much weight you attach to them. You don't want to force the player to hunt down 500 tomatoes, in a world, if that's the only way to get the ending. We were joking about this in Voodoo Vince, and that they would pull the curtain out from under me and say, all those various things you didn't collect, you need them to beat the game. And again, the whole point of the collectible hunt is that it's something secondary to the main experience. Something the player can do either on their downtime or as they're going from one place to the next. If you're going to make it the primary progression, then you're going to have to go all in. And that is design the entire game space around that, like we see with Mario and other games like it. But to begin to wrap things up, Crackdown was still surprising me that nobody else has tried to copy that exact model. Like I said, many games will have collectibles, but they'll only give you a resource that will eventually run out, such as getting bonus experience, money, things like that. And if the collectible loses its sense of purpose or reason to get, the player is going to stop wanting to get them. Again, with stuff like Crackdown or Hat in Time or Mario, those collectibles retain their value from beginning to end. You will always get some benefit, no matter how large or small, by picking them up. And if you design your game around a collectible hunt and they run out, then either reduce that amount or try to come up with some other secondary reward. Speaking about Mario, I actually do have one complaint about the Power Moon system, is that I would have liked some kind of other way or another reason for collecting them. Maybe like a Vandy room or a trophy room that would grow based on the number of Power Moons. Because eventually they just fall out in favor of unlocking more costumes, but they don't give you those costumes. You still need coins for them. But for those of you watching this, what are some of your favorite examples of a collectible hunt in a video game? And can you think of some where the hunt just did not work for you? You just gave up and thought, I don't want to do this. Let me know in the comments below, but thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to suggest a topic for me to look at, be sure to check out our Discord channel linked down below. We have a thread there where you can submit topics. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.